We see the bloodshed going on in this country, and it won't be overlooked. So we need to let the world know, and you need to know, that silence is the enemy and sound is the weapon.
Say his name, 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 won't you say his name? Say his name, 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 won't you say his name? Say his name, 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 won't you say his name? Say his name, 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 won't you say his name? Say his name, 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 won't you say his name?
Hi, my name is Yolanda Simpson. I am the administrative consultant for Sabrina Jordan and Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality. What I want to talk about today is I want to talk about police accountability. What we have to remember is that law enforcement was actually originally created to make sure that they had slave patrol in the South and to ensure in the North that all of the slaves that were migrating to the North were handled and intimidated and corralled, and to make sure that the blacks were not invading the spaces of white people. It is time that law enforcement and the police departments in our state and around the country are reformed. What Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality, their goal is to make sure that police are held accountable for the murders of unarmed black, brown, white, Hispanic, whatever the color, that they are held accountable for the murders of these young black people and people across the country. Ohio has long been ignored for the murders of the John Crawford III, Jamarco Machan, Dante Martin, Tamir Rice. A lot of people are not talking about some of the police brutality cases that are happening in Ohio. Sabrina wants to change that. Sabrina Jordan wants to make sure that police are held accountable for the murders of unarmed victims. Mike DeWine, the Attorney General at the time, has decided that he was going to put together some kind of police accountability training for law enforcement. And as he stated, he's going to focus on implicit bias training, de-escalation training, interact with people in crisis and mental health issues so that police are not just killing people on command. Unfortunately, Mike DeWine was in charge of the John Crawford III case, the Tamir Rice case, and various other cases in Ohio, and they did absolutely nothing to ensure that those police officers who were murdering those unarmed victims were held accountable. Right now in the Senate, there is a Protect and Serve Act of 2018. This is to make sure that anybody who causes any kind of injury or harm to a police officer will be knowingly charged for these crimes. They should be in prison for up to 10 years. Police already have protection. Police already have protection against any kind of bodily injury and bodily harm. The problem is that there's no protection for unarmed victims. Sabrina is trying her best with Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality to make those kinds of changes. Sacramento has made a change that is supposedly helping with officers dealing with excessive force, deadly force, and unnecessary force. The charge right now is to decide that what they're going to try to do is that they're going to try to pass a law that says that any police officer who has been had complaints against any kind of unnecessary force, for extreme harassment, they will have to open those records up to the public. They're also trying to change the excessive force and the unnecessary force language so that police officers are held accountable when they use unnecessary force to kill unarmed victims. John Kasich, who is now the governor, also decided that he was going to start a task force. And the task force that he started was to explore several objectives to help with police communication, police relationships with communities of color. Unfortunately, it fell short. The primary focus of this was to make sure, and I'll read, the 7 key areas was accountability and oversight, community education, community involvement, grand jury process, recruiting and hiring, standards and training. Unfortunately, that did very little to stop the officer from killing Tamir Rice. It did very little to stop the officer from killing John Crawford III. It did absolutely nothing to stop the murder of Jamarco McShann. The most important thing that Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality, they want to give comfort, they want to give a safe space, they want to make sure these families are heard. They are given a safe space for these families can mourn the losses of those who are murdered by police, but they also want to make sure that they are going to do something legislatively to ensure that police are held accountable. The most important thing that we can do for Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality is to make sure that we elect officials who are interested in criminal reform. We absolutely need the law enforcement departments, the police departments across the country to change the structure of their systemic racist organizations. The only way we can do that is to vet candidates who are interested in police reform. If we continue to allow the killing of a 17-year-old, Antoine Rose, who was running away from the police officer, who was shot in the back, for Stephon Clark, who was in his grandparents' backyard, who was shot because he had a cell phone, for Jamarco McShann, who was just asleep and was shot just merely because he was asleep, then we are going to have to make an effort to get out and vote. We are going to have to make an effort to vet the right candidates to make sure that they are interested not in superficial aesthetic criminal reform, but a real abolishment of the systemic racist structure and organization that continues to allow police brutality and excessive force to kill our young people, our old people, black, white, Hispanic, Muslim. It doesn't matter. What matters is that if we are going to actually see revolution, if we are actually going to see activism, if we are going to actually have to really take, some initiative to make sure that Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality doesn't have to add another name, another victim to the list, then we are going to have to make sure that we get involved in the political process. The political process matters. Attorney General Mike DeWine is running for governor. It is imperative that we make sure that he does not become the governor of Ohio. If you don't vote, if you don't get involved in the political process, if you don't get interested in a Democratic Party, the party that probably is in our best interest to some degree, if you don't start holding Republicans accountable, if you don't talk to the sheriff's office, if you don't talk to the police officers who are policing your community, then we're going to get the same thing. We're going to have to stand and protest and march another killing. It is imperative that you support Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality or any organization that is looking out for the best interests of our people in our community, and not just our community. We have to really keep in mind that if there is excessive force, if there's unnecessary force, if there's deadly force in our community, it's going to eventually reach all communities. If we are not holding police accountable, police will not be accountable to anyone. If we continue to militarize our police departments, the military will eventually take over every community. It is imperative that we support Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality. It's imperative that we make sure that we are vetting the candidates who are going to ensure that our issue, our needs, our people, we all matter. I support Sabrina Jordan. I support Ohio Families Unite Against Police Brutality, and I look forward to her doing some extraordinarily good in the legislative process and vetting candidates and political parties and political elected officials and making sure that they speak very prominently on the issues of excessive force and deadly force and necessary force, and actually convicting these police officers who are killing our people with impunity. Thank you.